Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
All right, well, today we're going deep on someone who really needs no introduction. Bill Gates.
Oh, yeah, should be interesting.
Definitely. Everyone knows him as the co-founder of Microsoft, the
Right.
company that,
Shaped how we use computers, really.
yeah, exactly. But his story goes way beyond just code and operating systems. Like, did you know he actually wrote a tic-tac-toe program?
When was it, like middle school or something?
Yeah, in 8th grade. It's wild. And get this, he even held the record for the fastest pancake sorting algorithm at one point.
Really? I did not know that. I guess that kind of makes sense, though, with his analytical mind.
Right. So today we're going to uncover how he went from like this programming whiz to a global philanthropist tackling some of the world's biggest challenges. It's a fascinating story.
It really is. What I think is so interesting is how much his story kind of mirrors how the whole digital age evolved. It's got ambition, innovation, and ultimately this drive to leave a real mark on the world.
Absolutely. So let's rewind all the way back. Bill Gates, growing up in Seattle, wasn't exactly your average kid.
I can imagine.
While other kids were out playing, he was already like totally absorbed in this world of logic and problem solving.
It's funny how some people just seem, I don't know, drawn to a certain field,
Wow.
like with Gates and computers. Even before they were everywhere, he was fascinated. Kind of a sign of things to come, right?
Totally. And remember, this was way before computers were in every home.
Mm-hmm.
So at 13, he writes his first computer program. And it wasn't just any program, it was a tic-tac-toe game. I mean, that's not just messing around. That shows a real grasp of, like, programming concepts, even at that age.
Yeah, that's impressive.
For sure. And him and his friend Paul Allen, they were basically inseparable, spending hours and hours in their school's computer lab.
Oh, yeah. They were quite the duo. Weren't they even banned from the lab at some point? Something about exploiting bugs to get free computer time.
Haha, yep. Classic. Talk about entrepreneurial spirit, right?
Yeah.
Even back then, they saw an opportunity and went for it. And it's not even just that. They actually formed a company as teenagers, called it Trafodata.
No way. What did they do?
They developed these systems for counting traffic. Imagine that. High schoolers running their own business.
That's incredible.
It really is. And, working with Alan like that, it wasn't just some teenage thing. It really laid the foundation for how they'd work together later on.
Yeah, it shows you how driven they were. They didn't just dream about computers. They were actually out there doing stuff.
Exactly. Now, Gates does go to Harvard for a bit, but ends up dropping out. The pull of the software world was just too strong, I guess.
The coding was calling.
Right. And so in 1975, he and Alan take this huge leap and co-found Microsoft in, of all places, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Their goal, to make software something everyone could use and afford at a time when, people were just starting to understand what personal computers could really do.
It was such a time of potential, and they were right there at the beginning of it all. Their first big thing was a basic interpreter for the Altair 8800, one of the earliest personal computers. Huge hit with hobbyists.
Totally. But it also brought this huge problem to light. Software piracy. Can you imagine pouring your heart into developing a program and then people just copy it and share it for free?
Oh, I bet that was frustrating. What'd they do?
Well, Gates takes a stand and writes this letter, which becomes known as his open letter to hobbyists.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. It was kind of a big deal, right?
Huge. And it wasn't just him complaining. It was this well-thought-out argument for treating software like a real product, something worth paying for. It challenged the way things were done back then and really set the stage for the whole software industry as we know it.
One letter changed everything, huh?
Pretty much. But the real game changer for Microsoft was their deal with IBM. IBM's building their first personal computer, and they need an operating system. Gates, always the savvy businessman, sees this golden opportunity and makes a deal to provide what becomes MS-DOS.
That was a smart move.
Oh, yeah, but here's where his real genius comes in. Most people would just been happy with the deal, right? But Gates negotiates this one clause that lets Microsoft license MS-DOS to other companies too.
Yeah.
So as IBM PCs and their clones become like the industry standard, Microsoft's operating system is right there with them, riding that wave of success.
Wow. Talk about thinking ahead. That one clause basically built his empire.
Right? It's like that's the moment Bill Gates goes from just a talented programmer to a true visionary leader.
Absolutely. It was a calculated risk that paid off big time. MS-DOS takes off, and Microsoft is on a roll. And Gates, he was known for being pretty intense, demanding leader, pushes the company forward. They release new programming languages, applications, and then eventually the first versions of Windows.
Speaking of Windows, that's a whole other era we're about to get into.
But before we go there, I just got to say, if you were digging this deep dive into Bill Gates, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the rest of this story or any of our other fascinating stories here on Tell Me More.
You got that right. Okay, so Windows. I mean, it's amazing how Microsoft went from, making software for these computer hobbyists to creating the operating system that's like synonymous with using a computer.
It's everywhere.
It really is.
Yeah.
But I bet that wasn't an easy road, right? Didn't they have to deal with like some serious competition? I'm thinking Apple especially, since they were already doing the whole graphical user interface thing with the Macintosh.
Oh, absolutely. Developing Windows was basically Microsoft's answer to the whole graphical user interface trend that was happening. It totally changed how people use computers. You didn't have to memorize a bunch of commands anymore. It was all point, click, drag. It made computers so much easier for, well, everyone to use, really.
So Windows was like opening up the digital world to like regular people.
Yeah.
It's been quite the revolution. But I'm guessing it wasn't all smooth sailing, right? Were there some legal issues around this time?
Yeah. The late 90s and early 2000s were a pretty defining time for Microsoft, legally speaking. They had those big antitrust lawsuits against them. Basically, critics were saying Microsoft was using their, huge market share to, squash competition and unfairly promote their own products. Led to years of legal battles, and in the end, they were found to have violated antitrust laws.
Whoa, that's a big accusation. So
Yeah.
how did Microsoft and Gates specifically respond to all of that?
Well, their argument was that they were just, competing hard in a really fast-moving market. They said their success was all about innovation and giving customers what they wanted. But the whole thing did lead to some major changes in how they did business, and it kind of had a ripple effect on the whole tech industry, too. Brought up some important questions about how much power these huge tech companies have and what responsibility comes with that.
That's a good point. Makes you think about, where's the line between being innovative and being fair, But let's shift gears a bit. It seems like right around this time, Bill Gates starts to kind of transition away from just being a tech guy and gets more interested in, global issues.
Yeah, exactly. As Microsoft was getting more and more successful, Gates really started to focus more on philanthropy. So in the late 90s, him and Melinda, his wife at the time, they co-found the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, their goal, tackling some of the world's toughest problems. And it wasn't just about donating money. They were really hands-on, strategic about it.
So it's less about charity and more about, actually creating solutions.
Exactly. People call it venture philanthropy sometimes. They'd find promising solutions, things with the potential to make a big impact, and then they'd really invest in developing and putting those solutions into action. Could be anything from funding research for new vaccines to improving sanitation or empowering women in developing countries.
Wow, that's a whole different approach to philanthropy. It's like they were using their entrepreneurial mindset, but for global problems this time. So what kind of impact have they actually had?
Oh, a huge impact, especially when it comes to global health. I mean, they've put billions into researching and developing vaccines for diseases like polio, measles, and malaria, which has led to way fewer kids dying around the world. They've also been really key in getting us closer to, eradicating polio completely.
That's amazing. It sounds like they really use their resources to, make real progress in areas where it was desperately needed. But has there been any pushback against their approach?
There's always some debate. Some people say they lean too heavily on technological solutions, that maybe they don't always consider the bigger picture, like the social and economic stuff that contributes to poverty and disease in the first place. And then there's also the whole discussion about their influence, They have so much wealth, so much power to shape global agendas, which some people find concerning.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a reminder that even when you have the best intentions, these complicated problems need carefully thought out solutions. I'm also curious to learn a little more about Bill Gates, the person outside of the boardroom and the philanthropy work. What's he like?
Well, even with all his wealth, he's known for being pretty down to earth. Did you know he flew coach for years? Even after becoming a billionaire? Didn't get a private jet until 1997.
Wow, that is surprising. You wouldn't normally picture someone like him flying coach. Says something about him, though, Maybe he's just practical, or maybe he wants to stay, connected to some sense of normalcy.
He's also a huge reader, loves learning new stuff. His personal library is insane. Thousands of books on everything from science and tech to history and literature.
So the whole stereotype of like the tech genius who's only into code and gadgets, that doesn't really apply to Bill Gates, does it? He seems to have a lot of different interests. Is there anything else about him that might surprise people?
Well, this probably won't surprise you given how analytical he is, but he actually held the world record for the fastest pancake sorting algorithm.
Wait, hold on. A pancake sorting what?
Algorithm. Apparently, he came up with an algorithm for sorting a stack of pancakes, different sizes, in the most efficient way.
Okay, that's both hilarious and super impressive. Like,
Yeah.
even in his free time, he can't resist a good brain teaser, huh? It's those little details that make these, larger-than-life people seem more human.
Definitely. Shows they have interests and passions outside of, their public image, just like everyone else.
Exactly. So we've talked about Bill Gates, the innovator, the philanthropist, and now the pancake sorting champ. What's next on our deep dive list? All right, so we followed Bill Gates' journey from like coding prodigy to tech titan and now to global philanthropist.
It's quite the story, isn't it?
It really is. But as we wrap up our deep dive, I think it's worth spending a bit more time on the legacy he's building with the Bill Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah, good point. I mean, that's a huge part of how he'll be remembered, right? This drive to use his wealth and influence to try and solve some of these massive global issues.
Exactly. And they've set some pretty ambitious goals, right? Fighting diseases, improving education, tackling poverty.
Quite a gamut.
It really is. And they've made some serious progress, especially in global health. I was reading about how they've put billions into researching and developing vaccines for diseases like polio and measles.
Oh, yeah. Their global health work has been amazing. And it's not just about funding research either. It's about actually getting those vaccines to the people who need them, which often means reaching remote communities that, don't have easy access to healthcare. They've worked with governments, healthcare providers, local organizations, you name it, to build these distribution networks.
That's got to be a massive undertaking.
It is. But the results, I mean, they speak for themselves. Way fewer kids dying. And like I said earlier, we're so much closer to wiping out polio for good.
That's incredible. It's really cool to see how they're combining like cutting edge science with this really practical on the ground approach.
Absolutely. It's one thing to develop a vaccine. It's another to actually make sure it gets to the people who need it most.
Totally. But, there has been some criticism of their approach, right? Some people argue they rely too much on technology and maybe don't always take the time to understand the communities they're trying to help. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that even with the best intentions, working on issues this big, this complex, there are going to be challenges. It's really important for any organization, especially one with as much influence as the Gates Foundation, to be open to feedback, to be constantly learning and adapting, making sure their work actually aligns with what the communities need and want.
It sounds like navigating these things takes a lot of humility, collaboration, and a willingness to really listen.
For sure.
But I think it's fair to say that overall, the Gates Foundation has done a lot of good for people around the world.
Absolutely. Their impact is huge. And while there's always room for improvement and healthy debate about the best way to do things, their work really shows Bill Gates' dedication to using his resources to tackle these global challenges.
So, wow. We've covered a lot of ground today. We've seen Bill Gates as this programming genius, this tech visionary who built an empire, and now this philanthropist trying to make a real difference in the world.
It's an inspiring story, for sure.
It really is. It makes you think about the power of human ingenuity, how important it is to be able to adapt to change, and how you can use your talents to have a lasting impact.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of Bill Gates. Thanks for tuning us on Tell Me More Stories Told this podcast.
It's been a pleasure.
And to everyone listening, we'll catch you next time for another captivating story. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep telling me more.